In a war-torn fantasy realm, where vampires rule the night and humans cower behind crumbling walls, 14-year-old Elara finds herself alone with her 2-year-old sister, Rosie, after their village is destroyed by a brutal raid. With winter closing in and no shelter, food or hope, Elara makes a desperate decision. She walks through the forbidden woods to the ancient mansion of Lord Kieran, a vampire feared even by his own kind. Legends say he shows no mercy, that he collects the blood of the desperate. But when Elara knocks on his door, clutching her baby sister, what he offers isn't mercy. It's a bargain that will bind their fates together in ways she never imagined. What begins as a transaction of survival slowly unravels into a story of unexpected connection, heartbreaking sacrifice, and a love that transcends the boundaries between human and monster. The frost bit through Elara's threadbare cloak like tiny fangs, but she barely felt it anymore. Her arms had gone numb an hour ago, or was it two? Time had become slippery, meaningless, just like everything else since the raid. Lala, cold. Rosie's small voice was barely a whisper against Elara's chest, her tiny fingers clutching the torn fabric of her sister's dress. I know, Rosie, I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer. Elara's voice cracked, and she hated herself for the lie. She didn't know if there would be anything after this. She didn't know if they'd even make it through the night. The forbidden woods loomed around them, skeletal trees reaching toward a moonless sky like the fingers of the dead. No birds sang here, no creatures stirred. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath in this cursed place. The only sound was the crunch of frozen leaves beneath Elara's feet and Rosie's shallow, rattling breathing. 3 days. It had been 3 days since the soldiers came. Elara squeezed her eyes shut against the memory, but it came anyway. It always came. The screams, the smoke, her mother's desperate eyes as she shoved both girls into the root cellar. Stay silent. No matter what you hear, stay silent. The sound of boots overhead, her mother's final cry cut brutally short. Rosie had started to wail, and Elara had clamped her hand over her baby sister's mouth, tears streaming down her face as she whispered frantically, "Yes, please, Rosie, please be quiet, please." They'd hidden for hours in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of earth and potatoes and old wine. When Elara finally climbed out, the village was gone. Just ash and bodies and silence. She was 14 years old, and suddenly she was all Rosie had in the entire world. Lala, hungry. Rosie's voice pulled her back to the present. Those blue eyes, their mother's eyes, stared up at her with trust that made Elara want to scream. What had she done to deserve that trust? She'd let them run out of the stale bread she'd scavenged. She'd failed to find shelter in the neighboring villages, all of them too scared or too poor to take in refugees. She'd watched Rosie's cheeks grow hollow, her skin grow pale, her voice grow weaker. Soon, Rosie, we're almost there. Another lie. But what else could she say? We're going to die out here in the cold, and it's my fault. The trees began to thin, and Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the skeletal branches, she could see it. Blackthorn Manor, the vampire's mansion. It rose from the earth like a beautiful nightmare, all dark stone and sharp towers, windows glowing with warm golden light that seemed obscene in this dead forest. Gargoyles perched on the corners of the roof, their faces frozen in eternal screams. The iron gate stood open, as if inviting her in, as if it had been waiting. Everyone knew about Lord Kieran. Mothers used his name to frighten disobedient children. Behave, or Lord Kieran will come for you in the night. Soldiers spoke his name in whispers, even the cruel ones who'd destroyed her village. The stories varied. Some said he was ancient, older than the kingdom itself. Others claimed he'd once been human, a prince who'd made a dark bargain. But they all agreed on one thing: he was death in beautiful form, and no one who went to Blackthorn Manor uninvited ever came back. But here was the thing that made Elara's decision. Invited guests sometimes returned, changed, haunted, but alive. Pretty house, Rosie murmured, her fever-bright eyes fixed on the glowing windows. Yes, baby, pretty house. Elara's legs trembled as she took the first step toward the gates, then another. Then another. She'd thought about this for the past day and a half, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. She could let Rosie die slowly from cold and hunger. She could abandon her sister at some distant village and hope for mercy that probably wouldn't come. Or she could do this: knock on a monster's door and beg. At least this way, there was a chance. However small, the gravel crunching beneath her feet sounded impossibly loud as she crossed the courtyard. Gardens that must have been beautiful in summer now lay dormant, but even in winter they were meticulously maintained. Rose bushes, their thorny branches bare. Stone fountains, frozen mid-flow. Everything about this place spoke of wealth and power and something else, something that made the hair on the back of Elara's neck stand up. The front door was massive, made of dark wood, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the corner of her vision. A heavy iron knocker in the shape of a wolf's head hung at its center. Elara stood before it, Rosie's weight somehow both impossibly heavy and heartbreakingly light in her arms. This is insane. This is how we die. But they were dying anyway. She reached up with one shaking hand and grasped the iron wolf. It was cold enough to burn. She lifted it and let it fall. The sound echoed through the courtyard like a death knell. Nothing happened. Seconds stretched into minutes. Rosie coughed, a wet sound that terrified Elara more than the vampire ever could. She raised the knocker again, bringing it down harder this time. Again and again. "Please," she whispered. "Please, please." The door swung open silently. No one stood in the doorway, just warm air that rushed out to meet them, carrying the scent of burning wood and something else, something dark and sweet, that made Elara's head swim. The entrance hall beyond was lit by dozens of candles in silver sconces, their light dancing across marble floors and walls, hung with tapestries depicting battles between creatures of nightmare. "Hello?" Elara's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. I seek an audience with Lord Kieran." The silence pressed down on her. Then from somewhere deep within the house, a voice responded. It was beautiful and terrible, like music played on an instrument made from bones. "Then enter, child. I've been expecting you." Elara's blood turned to ice. Expecting her? How could he have been expecting her? But Rosie coughed again, and the decision was made. Elara stepped across the threshold. The door slammed shut behind her with such force that she jumped, clutching Rosie tighter. The baby whimpered, but didn't cry. She'd grown too weak, even for that. "Follow the candles," the voice instructed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The hall to your left. Walk until you find me." Elara's feet moved before her mind could catch up. The hallway stretched before her, impossibly long, lined with portraits of beautiful people with sad eyes. Were they all vampires or victims? The candles flickered as she passed, making the painted figures seem to move, to watch her. The hallway opened into a vast study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with more books than Elara had ever seen in her life. A fireplace large enough to stand in roared with flames, warming the room to an almost uncomfortable degree. Plush chairs were arranged near the fire, and between them stood a figure that made Elara forget how to breathe. Lord Kieran was not what she'd expected. She'd imagined something monstrous. Pale skin stretched over a skull, red eyes, fangs dripping with blood. But the man who stood before her was beautiful, in a way that hurt to look at. Tall and lean, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and skin like porcelain. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and silver and fathomless. He wore a black velvet coat over a white shirt, simple but clearly expensive. When he moved to face her fully, his movements were liquid grace, predatory and perfect. But it was his expression that stopped her heart. He wasn't smiling the cruel smile she'd expected. Instead, he looked sad, ancient sadness, the kind that had roots reaching back centuries. Elara Ashwood, he said softly, 14 years old, survivor of the Millbrook raid, and this, his eyes shifted to Rosie, and something flickered across his face. This is Rosalie, 2 years, 3 months, 8 days old. She has a fever of under 103 degrees. Pneumonia, if I'm not mistaken. She has perhaps 2 days left, 3 if she's strong. Elara stumbled backward, hitting the doorframe. How do you know our names? How do you... I know many things. Kieran moved to one of the chairs and sank into it with a sigh. I know that you walked for 2 days to reach my door. I know that you haven't eaten in 3. I know that you're terrified of me, but more terrified of watching your sister die. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit, before you collapse. I can't. I need to. Elara's words tangled in her mouth. Why was he being kind? Vampires weren't kind. They were monsters. Everyone said so. You need to sit before you drop that child, Kieran said, and now there was steel in his voice. Sit, now. The command in his tone made her body obey before her mind could argue. She sank into the chair, Rosie still clutched to her chest. The warmth of the fire immediately began to make her aware of how cold she'd been, how numb. Her fingers started to tingle painfully. Kieran watched them with those storm-grey eyes. You came here to make a bargain. It wasn't a question, but Elara nodded anyway. Please, I'll do anything, work for you, serve you, give you whatever you want. Just, please save her. She's just a baby. She doesn't deserve this. And you do? The question caught her off guard. What? Do you deserve this? Kieran leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze pinning her in place. You're a child yourself. You should be learning needlework or how to read, perhaps courting some foolish village boy, not fleeing through winter woods with a dying infant. Do you deserve this, Elara Ashwood? Tears burned in her eyes. It doesn't matter what I deserve. She's all I have. She's all that's left. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Rosie's breathing rattled. Finally he spoke. I could save her. It would be trivially easy for me. My blood has properties that would cure her infection in hours, restore her strength, ensure she grows up healthy and strong. He paused. But you're right. I don't offer mercy. I offer bargains, and the price for your sister's life would be steep. Elara's heart hammered. Anything. I told you, anything. Your life. The words fell like stones into still water. Not your death, Kieran continued, his voice strangely gentle. I have no interest in killing children, but your life, your servitude, your time, your freedom. You would belong to me. Live here, in this manner, until either I release you or you die of natural causes. You would not be harmed, but you would not be free. 7 years of service for every year of her life. 14 years total. 14 years. Elara would be 28 when she was freed. If she lived that long. And Rosie, she managed to whisper, she would be healed tonight and taken to the Sisters of St. Magdalene. In the morning, they run an orphanage in the southern provinces, far from the war. She would be safe, cared for, educated. She would never know this place. She would never remember you came here, never know the price you paid. She would have a chance at a real life. Never remember her. The words cut deeper than any blade. Why? Elara's voice broke. Why do you want me? What could I possibly offer you? Kieran stood and moved to the window, looking out at the frozen gardens. When he spoke, his voice was distant, haunted. I am very old, Elara. Older than you can imagine. And I am very, very alone. I don't want your blood. I don't want your body. I want... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I want to remember what it's like to have someone in this house who isn't afraid. Someone who chose to be here, in a way. Someone alive. The raw loneliness in his voice shocked her more than anything else tonight. This creature, this monster, sounded human, broken. She'll forget me. Elara whispered, looking down at Rosie's flushed, sleeping face. Yes, it's better that way. Kinda. Was it? Elara didn't know. She didn't know anything anymore except that Rosie's breathing was getting shallower, and time was running out. She thought of her mother in those final moments, shoving them into the cellar, choosing their lives over her own without hesitation. That was what you did when you loved someone. You made the impossible choice. I accept, Elara said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff. I accept your bargain. Kieran turned from the window, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. You understand that once made, this bargain cannot be broken, that if you try to escape, if you violate the terms, the consequences will be severe. I understand. Then we have an accord. He moved toward them, and every instinct screamed at Elara to run. But she held still as he knelt before her chair, bringing them eye to eye. Give me your hand. With trembling fingers, Elara extended her right hand. Kieran took it gently in his. His skin was cool, but not cold, surprisingly soft, and produced a small silver knife from his coat. This will hurt, but only for a moment. He drew the blade across her palm in one swift motion. Elara gasped at the sharp pain, watching blood well up in her hand. Kieran did the same to his own palm, then pressed their bleeding hands together. The moment their blood mixed, power surged through Elara like lightning. Her vision went white. She felt something fundamental shift in the fabric of reality, felt chains of magic and binding wrap around her soul. When her vision cleared, there was a mark on her palm, a silver scar in the shape of a crescent moon. The mark of our bargain, Kieran explained. Releasing her hand, he showed his own palm, which bore an identical mark. Now, let me save your sister. He reached for Rosie, and Elara's arms tightened instinctively, but she forced herself to loosen her grip, to hand over the most precious thing in her world to a vampire. Kieran held Rosie with surprising gentleness, cradling her against his chest as if she were made of glass. Sleep, little one, he murmured, and Rosie's eyes fluttered closed obediently. He brought his wrist to his mouth, and Elara saw the flash of fangs there. Finally was the monster, as he bit into his own flesh. Dark blood welled up, and he placed his wrist to Rosie's lips. Just a few drops. That's all she needs. Rosie drank unconsciously, 3 small swallows, and then Kieran pulled away. The bite marks on his wrist sealed themselves instantly, the skin becoming flawless once more. For a moment, nothing happened. Then color began to return to Rosie's cheeks. Her breathing steadied, deepened, became peaceful. The fever flush faded from her skin. She'll sleep through the night, Kieran said, standing. By morning she'll be fully healed. I'll have my steward take her to the orphanage personally. They'll tell her she was found abandoned, but is now under the protection of a wealthy benefactor. She'll want for nothing. He laid Rosie on the couch near the fire, arranging cushions around her small body so she wouldn't roll off. Elara moved to sit beside her, stroking her baby sister's dark curls, memorizing every feature of that perfect little face. You have until dawn, Kieran said quietly. Say your goodbyes. I'll be in my chambers if you need anything. Your room has been prepared. 3rd floor, east wing, last door on the left. You'll find clothes and toiletries there. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Elara Ashwood, that was the most courageous thing I've seen in a very long time. Your sister is lucky to have had you. Then he was gone, leaving Elara alone with Rosie and the terrible knowledge of what she'd just done. She curled up on the couch, pulling her baby sister close, and wept silently as the fire burned down to embers. Dawn came too quickly. Elara had spent the entire night memorizing Rosie, the way her tiny fingers curled in sleep, the soft whistling sound of her breathing, the small birthmark on her left shoulder that looked like a crescent moon. By the time golden light began filtering through the tall windows, Elara had cried herself dry. No tears left, just a hollow, aching emptiness where her heart used to be. Rosie woke, as the sun touched her face, and the transformation was miraculous. Her eyes were bright and clear, no longer glazed with fever. Her cheeks were pink with health. She sat up and looked around the strange room with curious confusion. "Lala?" She spotted her sister and smiled. That beautiful gap-toothed smile that could make the worst days bearable. "Pretty room." "Yes, baby. Very pretty." Elara pulled her into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of her hair, milk and honey, and something indefinably rosy. "I love you so much. Do you know that? I love you more than anything in the whole world." "Love you too, Lala." Rosie squirmed, ready to explore this new place. "Hungry? Pancakes?" The innocent request broke something in Elara. She would never make Rosie pancakes again. Never braid her hair or tell her stories or watch her grow up. Someone else would teach her to read, to write, to dance. Someone else would be there for her first heartbreak, her wedding day, her children. She'll forget you. It's better that way, was it? How could forgetting love ever be better? A soft knock at the door made Elara look up. An elderly man in impeccable servant's livery stood in the doorway, his weathered face kind, but carefully neutral. He was human. Elara could tell by the warmth in his complexion, the natural rhythm of his breathing. "Miss Elara, I'm Bernard, Lord Kieran's steward. I've been instructed to prepare the young miss for her journey." His eyes softened as they landed on Rosie. "Breakfast has been laid out in the morning room. If you'll follow me." The morning room was smaller than the study, but no less elegant. Large windows overlooked a snow-covered garden, where early morning sun made the frost sparkle like diamonds. A table had been set with more food than Elara had seen in months. Warm bread with butter, jam, fresh fruit that must have cost a fortune in winter, boiled eggs, cheese, and yes, a stack of golden pancakes with honey. Rosie squealed with delight and climbed into a chair, reaching for the pancakes with both hands. Elara helped her, cutting them into small pieces, watching her sister eat with the enthusiasm only a toddler could have. She tried to memorize this too, the way Rosie's nose wrinkled when she tasted something especially good, the happy humming sound she made while chewing. Elara couldn't eat. Each bite turned to ash in her mouth. "Miss Elara," Bernard said gently, "you must eat something. Lord Kieran's orders." "I'm not hungry." Nevertheless, there was steel beneath the kindness. "You've had a trying few days. You need your strength, please." To avoid argument, Elara forced down some bread and cheese. It sat in her stomach like stones. Too soon Rosie was finished eating, her hair sticky with honey. Bernard brought a warm cloth to clean her, then produced a beautiful blue dress, clearly made for a child. "Lord Kieran had this commissioned last night," Bernard explained, seeing Elara's confusion. "He has connection. The dress, some toys for the journey, and papers establishing her as Rose Ashwood, ward of an anonymous benefactor. The sisters will ask no questions." The efficiency was staggering. Kieran had thought of everything. Elara helped dress Rosie in the blue dress, her fingers fumbling with the tiny buttons. Rosie twirled, making the skirt flare out. Laughing, she looked like a little princess. She looked happy. "Lala pretty too?" Rosie asked, reaching up to touch her sister's face. "Not as pretty as you, sweetheart." Elara's voice cracked. "Rosie, listen to me. This is very important." The toddler's face grew serious, sensing her sister's distress. "Okay, Lala, you're going on an adventure. Mr. Bernard is going to take you to a special house where there are lots of other children to play with. They'll take care of you, give you pretty dresses and good food and teach you wonderful things." Rosie's lower lip trembled. "Lala, come too." The question was a knife through the heart. "No, baby, I can't come with you. But that's okay. You're going to have so much fun, and you're going to be safe and happy. Don't want adventure without Lala." Tears welled up in those blue eyes. "Stay with Lala." Elara looked desperately at Bernard, who stepped forward with a small vial of clear liquid. "A mild sleeping draught," he explained quietly. "Lord Kieran thought it would be easier this way. She'll sleep through the journey, Wake up at the orphanage with no memory of the session. The trauma won't scar her. Elara wanted to scream that nothing about this was easy, that every choice was wrong, that she would rather die than do this. But she'd already made her bargain. Rosie would live. That was all that mattered. It's just medicine, Rosie, Elara whispered, taking the vial with shaking hands. It'll make you feel better. Open up. Rosie trusted her. Of course she did. She opened her mouth obediently, and Elara tipped the liquid onto her tongue. It took less than a minute. Rosie's eyes grew heavy, her body relaxing. Elara caught her as she slumped forward, holding her close. "Lalid," Rosie mumbled, already half asleep. "Love you. I love you too, Rosie. I love you so much. Be good. Be happy. Live the most beautiful life." Elara kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her tiny hands. "I'll never forget you. Never. I promise." But Rosie was already asleep, her breathing deep and peaceful. Bernard stepped forward, his old eyes suspiciously bright. "I'll take care of her, miss. I swear it on my life. She'll arrive safely." Elara forced herself to place Rosie in his arms. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, harder than surviving the raid, harder than the walk through the forbidden woods. She was cutting out her own heart and handing it to a stranger. Her bunny, Elara suddenly remembered, panic rising. "She sleeps with a little bunny, but we lost it in the raid. She'll be scared without." "Already packed with her things," Bernard assured her. Lord Kieran had one made, grey with a pink nose. Elara nodded, unable to speak. Bernard carried Rosie toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Miss Elara, you're a remarkable young woman. Your parents would be very proud." Then he was gone, taking Rosie with him, and Elara was alone. She stood frozen in the morning room, staring at the empty doorway, waiting for her body to understand what her mind already knew. She would never see her sister again. Rosie would grow up healthy and educated and loved, but she would do it without remembering the sister who'd sacrificed everything for her. The grief, when it finally came, drove Elara to her knees. She pressed her hands against the cold marble floor and screamed, a raw animal sound of pure anguish that echoed through the empty manor. She didn't hear Kieran enter, didn't notice him until he was kneeling beside her, not touching her but present, a solid shadow in her peripheral vision. "I know," he said quietly. "I know it hurts. I'm sorry." "You're sorry?" Elara laughed bitterly through her tears. "You did this. You took her from me. You brought her to my door," Kieran reminded her gently. "You made the choice. I simply honored the bargain. I hate you." The words ripped from her throat. "I hate you. I hate you. I hate you." "I know," he said again, still calm, still patient. "You're allowed to hate me, for as long as you need to." Elara wanted to hit him, to hurt him, to make him feel even a fraction of this pain. But what was the point? He was a vampire. He'd probably lived through centuries of loss. Her grief was nothing to him. Finally exhausted, she slumped against the floor, her cheek pressed to the cold marble. She felt hollow, empty, a shell of a person. "Come," Kieran said, standing and offering his hand. "I'll show you to your room. You should rest." "I don't want to rest. I don't want anything. Nevertheless, you must. You're human. You need sleep, food, routine. Fighting those needs won't change what's happened." His logic was infuriating, because it was correct. Elara ignored his offered hand and pushed herself to standing on her own, swaying slightly. The lack of sleep and food was catching up to her. Kieran led her through the manor in silence. In the daylight, the house was less ominous, but no less impressive. They passed servants, all human. Elara noted, who bowed to Kieran and regarded her with curious sympathy. They climbed a grand staircase to the second floor, then a narrower one to the third. The east wing was quieter, more intimate than the public spaces below. Kieran stopped at the last door on the left and pushed it open. The room took Elara's breath away. It was easily 3 times the size of the cottage she'd shared with her family. A large 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in soft blue fabric. Windows overlooked the gardens and the forest beyond. A fireplace crackled with fresh-laid flames. There was a writing desk, a wardrobe, bookshelves and a door that led to a private bathing room with an actual copper tub. "This is too much," Elara whispered. "This is your room for the duration of your stay," Kieran replied. "You'll find clothes in the wardrobe. I had to guess at sizes, but adjustments can be made. Books on any subject you wish can be brought from the library. If you need anything, pull the bell cord by the bed. Someone will come." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Elara, I want you to understand something. You are not a prisoner in the traditional sense. You cannot leave the grounds, true, but within them you have freedom. You may go anywhere in the manor except the West Wing, which is my private domain. You may explore the gardens, use the library, take meals when and where you please. I have no interest in making you miserable." "Then what do you want from me?" Elara asked, her voice dull. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. "Company," he finally said. "Conversation, perhaps. Eventually, friendship. But we have 14 years. There's no rush." He opened the door. "Rest now. We'll talk more tonight." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Elara stood in the center of the beautiful room and felt nothing. She should be grateful for the luxury, the safety, the food and warmth. Instead, she just felt absent, like she'd left the important parts of herself in that morning room with Rosie. She moved to the window and looked out at the forbidden wood. Somewhere beyond those trees, Bernard was carrying Rosie to her new life. Maybe she was still sleeping. Maybe she'd already woken up and forgotten she'd ever had a sister. The thought made fresh tears come, and Elara finally let herself cry properly, huge, racking sobs that shook her entire body. She cried until she was sick, until she had nothing left, until she was just an empty vessel breathing automatically. Eventually she stumbled to the bed and collapsed onto it, not bothering to remove her dirty dress or shoes. Sleep claimed her immediately, pulling her down into dark, dreamless oblivion. When Elara woke, the light had changed. Late afternoon, judging by the golden angle of the sun, for a blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back like a wave, and the grief threatened to drown her all over again. A soft knock at the door made her sit up. Yes, a young woman entered, perhaps 20, with kind brown eyes and a servant's uniform. "Miss Elara, I'm Clara. Lord Kieran asked me to check on you. I've brought some food, and I've drawn you a bath if you'd like." Elara looked down at herself, still wearing the same torn, dirty dress she'd arrived in. She probably smelled terrible. The thought of being clean seemed impossible, pointless. But the practical part of her brain, the part that had kept her and Rosie alive for 3 days, whispered that she needed to take care of herself. She'd made a bargain. She had to survive it. "Thank you," Elara said quietly. "That's kind." Clara smiled and gestured to a tray she'd set on the desk. "Soup, bread, tea. Eat first. The bath will stay warm. I've laid out a nightgown and a dress for tomorrow. If you need anything at all, just ring the bell. I'm usually on this floor." "Are you?" Elara hesitated. "Are you here by choice, or did you make a bargain too?" Clara's expression softened with understanding. "By choice. Lord Kieran pays well and treats his staff with more respect than most nobles treat their families. I've been here 3 years. It's a good position." She moved toward the door. "He's not what you think, miss. Give him a chance. You might be surprised." After Clara left, Elara forced herself to eat the soup. It was rich and flavorful, probably the best thing she'd ever tasted, but it still sat heavy in her stomach. She managed half the bowl before giving up. The bath was a revelation. Hot water, scented with lavender, deep enough to submerge completely. Elara scrubbed away 3 days of dirt and sweat and fear, watching the water turn gray. She washed her hair 3 times before it felt clean. When she finally climbed out, She felt more human, raw and broken, but human. The nightgown Clara had left was soft cotton, plain but well made. Elara pulled it on and climbed back into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. The mattress was so soft compared to the root-cellar floor, the cottage's straw pallet, the frozen ground of the forest. She should feel grateful. She should feel lucky to be alive, warm, safe. Instead, she just felt empty. As darkness fell outside her window, Elara stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine 14 years in this place. 14 years of waking up without Rosie's laugh, 14 years of beautiful rooms and elegant meals, and the company of a vampire who claimed to want friendship. It seemed impossible, endless, a lifetime. But she'd made her choice. Rosie would live. That had to be enough. It had to be. Another knock at the door, softer this time. Kieran's voice came through the wood. "Elara, may I enter?" She didn't want to see him, didn't want to talk to anyone, but she also didn't have the energy to refuse. Fine. Kieran entered, carrying a tray himself, more tea, and what looked like small cakes. He set it on the bedside table and took a seat in the chair by the fireplace, maintaining a careful distance. "I thought you might want company," he said. "Or I can leave. Your choice." Elara studied him in the firelight. He'd changed from his formal coat into simpler clothes, a dark shirt and trousers. His hair was tied back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. He looked tired. She realized with surprise. Could vampires get tired? "Why do you live here alone?" The question came out before she could stop it. "If you're so lonely, why not have a family?" "Surely vampires have families." "Some do," Kieran agreed. "But I've found that immortality and attachment don't mix well. Everyone you love eventually dies or leaves. After a few centuries, it's easier to maintain distance. Then why have me here at all?" He considered the question carefully. "Because loneliness and solitude are different things. I chose solitude to protect myself from loss. But loneliness crept in anyway, so gradually I didn't notice until it had poisoned everything. I haven't had a real conversation in decades, haven't laughed in longer. I wake each night and wonder why I bother continuing." He met her eyes. "You're here because I'm tired of being alone, but too afraid to risk loving anyone again. It's selfish, I know that." His honesty surprised her. She'd expected him to be cold, cruel, monstrous. This vulnerability was harder to reconcile with her image of vampires. "Did you love someone once?" Elara asked. "Someone who died?" "Many someones, but one especially." His expression grew distant. "Her name was Catherine. She was human, like you. We had 30 years together, every moment stolen, every day a blessing. And then she grew old while I stayed young. I watched her body fail, watched the light dim in her eyes. I held her hand as she died." He paused. "That was 200 years ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday." "I'm sorry," Elara whispered, and meant it. "So am I. Sorry for you, for Rosie, for all of us trapped by circumstances we can't control." He stood. "I'll leave you to rest. Tomorrow, if you feel up to it, I'd like to show you the library. You mentioned no one taught you to read well. I thought I might remedy that." "Why?" Elara asked. "What difference does it make if I can read?" Kieran smiled sadly. "Because 14 years is a long time to be bored, and because knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take from you. Not soldiers, not vampires, not fate itself. Once it's in your head, it's yours forever." After he left, Elara lay in the darkness thinking about Catherine, about love that lasted 30 years and grief that lasted 200. About a vampire who was afraid to care and a girl who'd just given up everything she cared about. Maybe they weren't so different after all. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it just made her feel more alone. The next morning, Elara woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and a fresh tray of breakfast waiting on her desk. She ate mechanically: toast, eggs, fruit, because her body demanded it, not because she tasted any of it. Clara appeared to help her dress. The gown was simple but beautiful, deep green wool with long sleeves and a fitted bodice. It was the nicest thing Elara had ever worn. "Lord Kieran is waiting in the library," Clara said, braiding Elara's damp hair. But there's no rush. Take your time. Elara nodded, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The girl looking back seemed like a stranger, clean, well-fed, dressed like a lady. Where was the desperate child who'd knocked on a vampire's door 3 nights ago? She found the library on the 2nd floor, a massive room that stretched up 2 stories, with a balcony running around the upper level. Every wall was covered in books, thousands upon thousands of them. The morning sun poured through tall windows, making the dust motes dance like tiny stars. Kieran stood by one of the windows, holding a leather-bound book. He turned as she entered, and something in his expression softened. "Good morning. Did you sleep?" Eventually, Elara moved into the room, running her fingers along the spines of the books. So many stories, so much knowledge, all trapped between leather covers. "Is this really all yours? Accumulated over several lifetimes? History, philosophy, poetry, science, stories from 100 different kingdoms, all here, and all yours to explore." He held out the book he'd been holding. "But I thought we might start with this. It's a collection of fairy tales. Simple language, beautiful illustrations, a good place to begin improving your reading." Elara took the book hesitantly. The cover was embossed with golden vines and flowers. She opened it carefully, seeing pages filled with text and colorful paintings of princesses and dragons and enchanted forests. "I can read a little," she admitted. "My mother taught me the basics before." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we'll build on that foundation," Kieran said gently. "Sit, let's begin." They spent the morning reading together. Kieran was a patient teacher, never mocking when Elara stumbled over words, always ready to explain meanings or pronunciation. The fairy tale was about a girl who saved her brothers from a curse. 7 boys turned into swans. She had to weave them shirts from nettles while remaining silent for 7 years. 7 years of silence for 7 brothers. Elara murmured, tracing the illustration of the girl with bleeding hands, still weaving. "That's a long time to give up your voice." "But she loved them," Kieran said. "Sometimes love requires sacrifice." Elara thought of Rosie, of 14 years instead of 7, of a silence that wouldn't be broken by a happy reunion. Does the story have a happy ending? Read and find out. They read until afternoon, taking breaks only when Elara's throat grew tired. In the story, the girl succeeded. She broke the curse, saved her brothers, and found her voice again. Love and sacrifice, rewarded with reunion and joy. "It's just a story," Elara said quietly, closing the book. "Real life doesn't work like that. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the sacrifice is worth it, even if you never see the reward." Kieran stood and moved to a different shelf, pulling down another book. "Tomorrow we'll read something different, perhaps some poetry, or a history of the northern kingdoms." "You're a quick learner, Elara. You'll be reading complex texts in no time." "And then what?" The question came out sharper than intended. "I read all your books and then just exist here for the rest of the 14 years. "Then you write your own stories," Kieran replied simply. "You learn whatever you want to learn. Music, painting, mathematics, languages. You fill the years with meaning instead of waiting for them to pass. That's how you survive imprisonment. You make it purposeful." "Is that what you do?" "I try." He returned the book to its shelf. "It's harder when you have eternity. 14 years seems long to you, but to me it's a blink. I've watched kingdoms rise and fall. I've seen the same mistakes repeated across centuries. After a while, everything starts to feel meaningless. That's the true curse of immortality. Not living forever, but caring forever, while everything else turns to dust." The raw honesty in his words surprised Elara. This wasn't the monster she'd expected. This was just someone tired, someone lonely, someone almost human in his pain. "I don't know how to do this," Elara admitted. "How to be here, how to keep going without her. Everything hurts." "I know, but it will hurt less eventually. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but someday. The human capacity for adaptation is remarkable. You'll survive this, Elara, and perhaps you'll find purpose in unexpected places." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe the pain would fade, that life could have meaning again. But right now, in this moment, it seemed impossible. Still, she'd survived impossible things before. As the sun set outside the library windows, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Elara made a decision. She couldn't change her circumstances, couldn't undo her bargain or bring Rosie back. But she could choose how she spent these 14 years. She could let grief consume her, or she could do what her mother would have wanted: survive, learn, grow, live. Tomorrow, she said to Kieran, I want to learn everything. History, mathematics, music, all of it. If I'm going to be here for 14 years, I'm not going to waste them. Something like pride flickered in Kieran's storm grey eyes. Then tomorrow we begin in earnest. Welcome to Blackthorn Manor, Elara Ashwood. Your education starts now. It wasn't mercy he was offering. It wasn't freedom. But maybe, just maybe, it was something she could survive. 3 months passed like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare dressed in velvet. Elara threw herself into learning with a ferocity that surprised even Kieran. Every morning she woke before dawn and made her way to the library, often finding him already there, books selected and waiting. They would read until her voice grew hoarse, then move to the music room where an ancient piano waited. Kieran taught her to play, his cool fingers guiding hers across the keys, coaxing out melodies that made her heart ache. Afternoons were for mathematics and science, subjects Elara had never imagined a girl like her would study. Kieran explained the movements of stars, the principles of physics, the elegant logic of numbers. Her mind, starved for stimulation after years of mere survival, devoured it all. Evenings they spent in conversation, sometimes about the books they'd read, sometimes about history, sometimes about nothing important at all. Kieran told her stories of the world before the Great War, of kingdoms that no longer existed, of wonders she could hardly imagine. And slowly, carefully, Elara began to tell him about her life, about her parents, about growing up in Millbrook, about the small joys that had made poverty bearable. She never spoke about Rosie. That wound was still too fresh, too raw. Saying her sister's name out loud felt like it would break her completely. The nightmares came every night without fail. Elara would wake gasping, sometimes screaming, reliving the raid or the desperate walk through the thirds, or the moment Bernard carried Rosie away. Clara would rush in to comfort her, bringing warm milk and sitting with her until the panic subsided. Kieran never came during these episodes, respecting her privacy, but she knew he heard. Vampire hearing was too acute to miss her screams. On the surface she was adapting, growing stronger. Underneath she was slowly crumbling. It was a Tuesday morning in early spring when everything finally shattered. Elara was in the library, attempting to read a collection of poems in an ancient language. Kieran was teaching her. The words kept blurring together, refusing to make sense. Her hands trembled as she held the book. She'd barely slept the night before. The nightmares had been particularly vicious, showing her Rosie crying for her, reaching out with small hands that Elara couldn't reach. Elara, Kieran's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Are you listening? What? Yes. Sorry. She tried to focus on the page, but the letters might as well have been dancing. You're not listening. You haven't been present all morning. He closed his own book. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't been fine since you arrived, but lately you've been worse. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. Elara stood abruptly, the book falling from her lap. I'm just tired. You're grieving. The word hit her like a physical blow. Don't, Elara, I said don't. Her voice cracked, rising toward hysteria. You don't get to talk hate grief. You don't get to pretend you understand. You took her from me. You made me give her up. You brought her to my door, Kieran said, his voice maddeningly calm. I offered a choice. You made it. I had no choice. She was dying. There's always a choice. You chose her life over your freedom. That was brave, but it was still a choice. You can't blame me for honoring the bargain you yourself proposed. Something inside Elara snapped. All the grief and rage and loneliness she'd been holding back for 3 months came pouring out in a toxic flood. You're a monster, a creature that feeds on desperation and calls it a bargain. You sit here in your mansion full of books, pretending to be civilized, but you're just a parasite. You wanted company because no one else can stand to be near you. She expected anger. expected him to remind her of the consequences of breaking their bargain, to threaten or intimidate or show his true nature. Instead, Kieran simply looked at her with infinite sadness and said, "You're right." The agreement shocked her into silence. "You're absolutely right," he continued, standing slowly. "I am a monster. I have lived for centuries by making bargains with desperate people. I took advantage of your circumstances because I was lonely and selfish. You're not wrong to hate me." He moved toward the door. "I'll leave you alone. I think perhaps we both need space." "That's it?" Elara's voice was shrill. "I call you a monster and you just agree?" Kieran paused in the doorway. "What would you have me do, Elara? Argue? Defend myself? Lock you in your room? I could do any of those things, but they wouldn't change the truth. You're suffering, and it's partially my fault. Getting angry at you for pointing that out would be cruel." He met her eyes. "I told you that you were allowed to hate me. I meant it." Then he was gone, leaving Elara alone in the library with her rage and grief, and the terrible realization that she couldn't even properly hate him because he refused to be the villain she needed. She sank to the floor, and finally let herself fall completely apart. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, the kind of crying that felt like dying. She cried for her parents, torn away too soon. She cried for her village, reduced to ash. She cried for her childhood, ended in an instant. But mostly she cried for Rosie, for her smile, her laugh, her tiny hands in Elara's hair, for all the moments they'd never have, all the memories that would never be made. She cried until she was empty, until there was nothing left but a hollow shell curled on the library floor. That's where Clara found her hours later, still lying on the carpet, staring at nothing. "Oh, Miss Elara." Clara knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "Come on, let's get you to bed." "I can't do this," Elara whispered. "I can't survive this." "Yes, you can. You're stronger than you know." "I'm not strong. I'm breaking." "Breaking and healing are different things, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to break before you can heal properly." Clara helped her to her feet. "Come on, one step at a time." Clara guided her back to her room, helped her into bed, brought tea that Elara couldn't drink. She sat beside her as the afternoon faded to evening, just a quiet presence while Elara stared at the ceiling and tried to remember how to exist. A soft knock came at the door. Clara went to answer it, speaking in low tones with someone in the hallway. When she returned, she held a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Lord Kieran asked me to give you this," he said. "He said you should have had it from the beginning, but he wasn't sure you were ready." Elara sat up slowly, taking the bundle. It was soft, lightweight. She unwrapped it with shaking hands. Inside was a stuffed grey bunny with a pink nose, identical to the one Bernard had packed for Rosie. A note was pinned to it in Kieran's elegant script. Bernard sent word. "Rose is thriving. She laughs often, makes friends easily, and loves her lessons. She doesn't remember the raid or the hunger or the fear. She only knows safety and joy. Your sacrifice gave her that. She's alive because of you. Never forget that." Elara clutched the bunny to her chest and cried again. But this time it was different. Not the desperate, drowning sobs from before, but something cleaner. Grief, yes, but also relief. Rosie was happy. Rosie was safe. The choice had been worth it. "He checks on her," Clara said softly. "Every week, Lord Kieran sends Bernard or one of the other staff to watch from a distance to make sure she's thriving. He never told you because he thought it would hurt worse to have updates. But he's been watching over her this whole time." "Why?" Elara's voice was hoarse from crying. "Why would he care? Because he's not the monster you think he is. He's just someone who's been hurt so many times that he's forgotten how to be soft." "But you're reminding him." Clara squeezed her hand. "You're good for each other, I think. You're both so lonely, so broken. Maybe that's why the bargain was meant to be." After Clara left, Elara held the bunny and read Kieran's note over and over until she'd memorized every word. She thought about him sending people to watch over Rosie, about his patience with her lessons, about the way he'd accepted her anger without defending himself. Maybe he was a monster, but maybe monsters could be kind too. The thought didn't make everything better, didn't erase the pain or the loss, but it cracked open a door that had been sealed shut. The possibility that these 14 years didn't have to be just survival. Maybe they could be something more. The next morning, Elara went looking for Kieran. She found him in the gardens, which had begun to bloom with the arrival of spring. He was tending to the rose bushes. A strange sight, this powerful vampire carefully pruning plants with bare hands. "I'm sorry," Elara said. Kieran looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "You have nothing to apologize for." "I do. You're not just a monster. I know that. I was lashing out because I'm in pain and you were convenient to blame." She moved closer, clutching the bunny she'd brought with her. "Thank you for checking on Rosie, for the bunny, for everything you've been trying to do. I haven't done much. You've done more than you had to, more than the bargain required." Elara sat on a stone bench near the roses. "I don't know how to do this, how to live with the grief. It feels like drowning." Kieran set down his pruning shears and joined her on the bench, maintaining a careful distance between them. "Grief is like that at first, an ocean trying to pull you under, but eventually you learn to swim, and one day you realize you've reached the shore." "How long did it take you with Catherine?" "Years, decades, if I'm honest. But the sharpest pain did fade. I learned to remember her with joy instead of just sorrow. To be grateful for the time we had rather than consumed by the time we didn't." He gestured to the roses. "These were her favorite. I've tended them for 200 years, every spring. At first it hurt to look at them. Now they bring me peace." Elara studied the roses, white, pink, deep red, all of them perfect and carefully maintained. 200 years of grief transformed into something beautiful. "Will you tell me about her?" Elara asked. "About Catherine?" And so Kieran did. He told her about meeting Catherine at a market, how she'd been selling ribbons and he'd been passing through, how her laugh had stopped him in his tracks, how he'd courted her, despite knowing it was dangerous, how she'd chosen him despite knowing what he was. Their wedding in secret, the cottage they'd shared, her love of flowers and poetry and terrible puns, the way she'd grown old so gracefully, never bitter about his eternal youth. Her final words, "Don't stop living just because I do." "But I did stop," Kieran admitted. "For a very long time. I went through the motions, read books, tended the roses, managed my affairs, but I wasn't really alive. I was just existing." He looked at Elara. "That's why I made the bargain with you. Not just for company, but because I hoped that saving someone might help me feel alive again. Selfish, I know. Not selfish, human." Elara smiled sadly, or the vampire equivalent anyway. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, surrounded by blooming roses and the sound of birds returning for spring. The grief was still there, would probably always be there, but it felt less like drowning and more like carrying something heavy. Bearable, if not easy. "Can I ask you something?" Elara said eventually. "Of course. That first night you said you'd been expecting me. How did you know I was coming?" Kieran's expression turned carefully neutral. "I've been alive a very long time, Elara. I've learned to pay attention to patterns, to the movement of fate. Your village was destroyed on the winter solstice. I knew refugees would flee through the forbidden woods. I knew some would be desperate enough to come here. I've been waiting for someone like you for a long time. Someone desperate. Someone brave enough to knock." He met her eyes. "You have no idea how many people have died in those woods, rather than ask me for help. You chose to try. That takes courage, or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." He stood, offering his hand. "Come, I want to show you something." Elara took his hand. His skin was cool but not unpleasant, and let him lead her deeper into the gardens. They walked past flowering trees and carefully manicured hedges until they reached a section Elara had never explored. Here, the garden was wilder, more natural. Small stream bubbled over rocks, and wildflowers grew in cheerful chaos. In the center of this wild garden stood a stone monument, simple and elegant, carved with names, hundreds of names. "Everyone I couldn't save," Kieran said quietly. "People who came to my door but arrived too late, too injured, too far gone. People I turned away because the price they offered wasn't enough. People I made bargains with who didn't survive." His finger traced some of the names. "I remember every single one. Their faces, their stories, their last words. This is my penance to remember, to never forget the cost of what I am." Elara stared at the monument, at the sheer number of names carved into the stone. "How many?" 743, over the course of 3 centuries. He paused. "You're the first in 50 years that I've actually saved. The first I've allowed myself to try for." The weight of that confession settled over them. Elara understood now. She wasn't just fulfilling a bargain. She was his attempt at redemption, his test to see if he could still care, still save someone, still be more than the monster he'd become. "No pressure then," she said, trying for levity. Kieran huffed a laugh, the first time she'd heard him make that sound. "Indeed. Don't die on me, Elara Ashwood. I have too much riding on your survival. I'll do my best, for now, but in 10 years, 20, when your friends are all married with children and you're still here with someone who doesn't age, doesn't change, can't give you a future." He cupped her face gently. "I'm not going to be the reason you wake up at 40 and realize you've wasted your life." Tears streamed down Elara's face. "You're not listening to me. You never listen when it comes to this. Because I love you enough to make the hard choice." Kieran's voice broke. "Don't you understand? Letting you go is killing me, but keeping you is killing you slowly, invisibly. I can see it, the way you look at yourself, in mirrors, the way you stare at my unchanging face, the way you've stopped talking about the future. You're living in a beautiful cage, Elara, and I'm the one keeping you locked inside. Then give me forever with you. I won't do that." Each word was firm, final. "I won't curse you with this existence. I won't watch you lose your humanity, your warmth, everything that makes you the person I love. I'd rather lose you to time than turn you into something you're not." Elara pulled away from him, fury and heartbreak roaring in her chest. "So what? You're just going to send me away? Again? Make this choice for me without any say?" "No." Kieran's voice was soft. "I'm asking you to choose. Really choose, with full knowledge of what you're giving up. I want you to leave the manor for 1 year, live in the world, meet people, see what's out there. And if, after a full year away from me, you still want to come back, then I'll accept your choice. I'll stop pushing you away. I'll love you for whatever time we have, even though it will destroy me when I lose you. And if I refuse to leave, then I'll leave instead. I'll close the manor and disappear, and you'll never see me again." His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I mean it, Elara. One way or another, you're getting distance from me. You need perspective. We both do." Elara wanted to scream, to argue, to refuse, but she could see the resolution in Kieran's face. He'd made up his mind, and nothing she said would change it. "Fine," she said coldly, standing up. "I'll leave. I'll go live in your stupid outside world. But when I come back in exactly 1 year, and I will come back, you better be ready to stop making decisions for me." She stormed away before he could see her completely break down. Elara left 3 days later. Kieran had arranged everything. A cottage in a peaceful village, enough money to live comfortably, letters of introduction to respectable families. He'd thought of everything, just like he always did. The goodbye was agony. They stood in the entrance hall, where she'd first arrived so many years ago, both trying to be strong, both failing miserably. 1 year, Kieran said, pressing a small package into her hands. "Write to me if you need anything. Bernard will forward your letters. I don't want to write to you. I want to stay with you. I know, But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. He brushed a tear from her cheek. Be brave, Elara. Like you were the first night you knocked on my door. Go and live and experience the world. And if you still want this, if you still want me, come back. I'll be waiting. Elara threw her arms around him, breathing in his familiar scent, old books and roses, and something indefinably him. I love you. That's not going to change. I love you too. That's why I have to let you go. The carriage ride away from Blackthorn Manor was the longest of Elara's life. She watched the mansion disappear into the distance, taking her heart with it. The village Kieran had chosen was everything he'd promised. Peaceful, pretty, full of kind people, eager to welcome a young woman with money and references. Elara rented the cottage, met the neighbors, attended local gatherings. She was introduced to several eligible young men, all of them perfectly nice, perfectly boring. She tried. God, she tried. She went to parties and smiled at jokes and accepted invitations to walk in the park. She let a merchant's son court her for 3 months, before gently ending it because she couldn't feel anything beyond mild affection. She volunteered at the local school, teaching children to read, finding purpose in their eager faces, and every single day she missed Kieran with an intensity that made her bones ache. 6 months into her exile, she opened the package he'd given her. Inside was a letter and a small portrait. The letter read, "My dearest Elara, if you're reading this, you've been gone long enough to need a reminder. The enclosed portrait is of you, painted from memory during one of our evenings in the library. This is how I see you, brilliant, beautiful, alive. This is why I love you. This is why I had to let you go. You deserve to shine in the world, not be hidden away in my shadows. But you choose to return. Know that I will love you until the stars burn out. Forever yours, Kieran." The portrait showed her at 18, curled in a library chair with a book, laughing at something off canvas. The detail was exquisite. He'd captured not just her features, but the joy in her expression, the life in her eyes. This was how he saw her. This was love. Elara cried until she couldn't breathe. At month 9, a letter arrived from Bernard. Kieran was ill, not physically, as vampires didn't get sick, but mentally. He'd stopped tending the roses, stopped reading, spent his days in his chambers staring at nothing. He was giving up, slowly unraveling without her. "He's dying of loneliness," Bernard wrote. "Whatever happened between you, whatever drove you away, please consider returning. I fear what will become of him if this continues." Elara wanted to leave immediately, but she'd promised a year. If she broke her word now, Kieran would never believe she'd made a real choice. He'd always wonder if she'd come back out of guilt or pity rather than love. So she waited, marking off days on her calendar like a prisoner counting toward freedom. She also did something else, something she'd been considering for months. She researched vampirism. The village had a surprisingly extensive library, and Elara poured through every text on vampires she could find. She learned about the turning process, the requirements, the risks. She learned that it wasn't as simple as drinking vampire blood. There were rituals, preparations, a narrow window of time between death and transformation. She learned that turned vampires retained their humanity more fully if they chose the transformation willingly, if they had a reason to hold on to who they were. She learned that it was possible, if dangerous, and she made a decision. If Kieran wouldn't turn her willingly, she'd find another way, because she finally understood what he'd been trying to tell her. She needed to choose this life with full knowledge of what she was giving up. And after 9 months in the real world, she knew beyond any doubt she didn't want any of it. Not the sunshine or the normal life, or the acceptable husband. She wanted Kieran, and she wanted forever. And she was willing to become a monster to have both. Elara returned to Blackthorn Manor on the first day of the 13th month, exactly 1 year after she'd left. The grounds looked neglected, gardens overgrown, leaves piled on pathways, gates creaking. Her heart sank. Bernard hadn't been exaggerating. She used her key Kieran had given her 1 year ago, and let herself into the quiet manor. No servants greeted her. The place felt empty, haunted. She found Bernard in the kitchen, looking older and more worried than she'd ever seen him. "Miss Elara," he stood quickly, relief flooding his face. "Thank God, he's in his chambers. He hasn't come out in weeks. How bad is it?" "Bad. He won't eat, won't see anyone. Just sits in the dark." Bernard gripped her hands. "Please, help him. You're the only one who can." Elara ran through the manor, her heart pounding. She burst through the doors of Kieran's chambers without knocking. The room was dark, curtains drawn, no candles lit. Kieran sat in a chair by the dead fireplace, still as a statue. He didn't look up when she entered. "Kieran?" Elara's voice broke. Slowly, so slowly, he raised his head. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, she could see how haggard he looked. His face gaunt, his eyes hollow, his entire being radiating despair. "You came back," he whispered. "I didn't think. I hoped, but I didn't think. Of course I came back. You idiot." Elara crossed the room and dropped to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. "Did you really think a year away would change how I feel? That I'd find someone else, fall in love with normal life? I'd hoped you would, prayed you would. Well, your prayers failed spectacularly. I was miserable every single day. I met nice people and went to parties and let boys court me, and all I could think about was you. How much I missed our conversations. How empty the world felt without you in it. How wrong everyone else seemed." She pressed her forehead to his. "I chose you, Kieran, fully, completely, with absolute knowledge of what I'm giving up. I chose you." Kieran's hands came up to cup her face, his touch reverent. "You're sure? Really sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. She felt his body shaking, felt wetness on her shoulder. Tears, she realized with shock. Kieran was crying. "I missed you," he breathed. "Every day was torture. I kept going to the library and forgetting you weren't there. Kept setting 2 places for dinner. Kept waking up reaching for you." He pulled back, searching her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have sent you away. I should have trusted you to know your own heart. You were trying to protect me. I understand, but no more, okay? No more pushing me away. No more making decisions for me. We're partners. Equal. We decide things together." She paused, gathering her courage. "Including my transformation." Kieran went very still. "What?" "I want you to turn me. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when I'm ready, when we're both ready. I want forever with you, Kieran. And I don't want you to watch me age and die. I don't want to leave you alone again. Elara, we discussed this." "No, you decided. I'm now telling you what I want. I've researched it, thought about it, considered every angle. I know what I'd be giving up. I know what I'd do. And I still want it." She took his hands. "I want to be with you, not for 60 years or 80 years, but forever. I want to tend Catherine's roses for the next 200 years. I want to read every book in your library twice. I want to see kingdoms rise and fall with you by my side. That's my choice, mine. You'd have to kill to survive, feed on blood, watch the world change while you stay frozen. I know, and I'd have you to help me through it. We'd face it together." Elara smiled through her tears. "Remember what you told me that first night. You wanted to remember what it's like to have someone who isn't afraid, someone who chose to be here. Well, I'm choosing us not just to stay here, but to stay forever, to be yours in every way possible." Kieran studied her face for a long moment, searching for doubt, for hesitation. He found none. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it right. Not now. You need time to be absolutely certain. 2 more years of thinking, of living together, of making sure this is really what you want. And we do it with every precaution, every ritual that might help you retain your humanity. I won't lose you to the monster, Elara. If we do this, you stay you." 2 years, Elara agreed. "And then, forever." They sealed the promise with a kiss, not gentle this time, but desperate and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, laughing, crying, overwhelmed. "I love you," Kieran whispered. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," Elara replied. "Be terrified with me, but don't ever push me away again. Never again. I promise." They spent the rest of the night in Kieran's chambers, talking and planning and simply being together. Kieran fed for the first time in weeks, some of the vitality returning to his face. Elara bullied him into opening curtains and letting in moonlight. Slowly, the room came back to life, and with it so did they. The ritual was complex, requiring preparation and precision. Kieran had spent months researching, consulting old texts, ensuring they did everything possible to preserve Elara's humanity during the transformation. The process would be painful, dangerous, with no guarantee of success, but they were ready. Elara was 26 now, fully an adult, fully certain of her choice. They'd spent 2 more beautiful years together, traveling, learning, loving. She'd written letters to Rosie through Bernard, never identifying herself, just supporting her sister's education from afar. Rose was 19 now, engaged to a kind man, working as a teacher. She'd built a beautiful life, happy and whole, with no memory of the sister who'd sacrificed everything for her. That was enough. That was everything. The night before the ritual, Kieran took Elara to the wild garden, to the stone monument with all the names. "I need you to understand what you're giving up," he said seriously. "This is your last chance to change your mind, to walk away and live a normal human life. If we do this tomorrow, there's no going back." Elara looked at the monument, at the hundreds of names carved in stone, all the people Kieran had lost or failed to save. Then she looked at him, this beautiful, broken, eternal man who'd given her purpose and knowledge and love. "I'm not giving anything up," she said firmly. "I'm gaining everything. I'm gaining forever. With the person I love. I'm gaining the chance to never leave you alone again. I'm gaining a life that's extraordinary instead of ordinary." She took his hand. "I'm ready, Kieran. I've never been more ready for anything." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I'm going to spend every day of forever trying to be worthy of this choice you're making. You already are." They stood together under the stars, holding each other, as the moon rose full and bright above them. Tomorrow would bring pain and transformation and uncertainty, but it would also bring the promise of forever. No more watching each other age, no more fear of loss, no more counting down the limited days they had together. Tomorrow they would become something new together. But tonight, they were simply Kieran and Elara, vampire and human, broken pieces that had found a way to fit together into something beautiful and whole. The transformation had worked. It had been agony, 3 days of burning pain as Elara's body died and was reborn into something else. But she'd survived it with her mind intact, her memories clear, her love for Kieran untarnished. She'd fed carefully, learning to control the hunger, to take what she needed without killing. She'd lost the sunlight, yes, but gained heightened senses, strength, and the certainty of forever. She stood in Catherine's rose garden, her rose garden now too, tending the bushes as Kieran worked beside her. 205 years after losing Catherine, he was finally allowing himself to move forward, to honor the past without being imprisoned by it. "Do you regret it?" Kieran asked, as he did every few weeks. "Becoming this?" Elara considered the question honestly, as she always did. "I miss sunshine sometimes, miss the feeling of hunger and tiredness, the simple rhythms of human life. But no, I don't regret it. This is where I'm meant to be, continue with you forever. That's all I've ever wanted." Kieran set down his pruning shears and pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope, a reason to keep going, someone to share eternity with." "We've given each other that," Elara corrected. She rested her head against his chest. listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. A heart that beat only because he willed it to, a remnant of the humanity he refused to fully abandon. "Have you heard from Bernard?" "Yes, he sent word this morning." Kieran's voice was gentle, understanding the real question she was asking. "Rose is married now. The ceremony was beautiful. She and her husband are expecting their first child in the spring." Elara felt the familiar bittersweet ache in her chest, not the destroying grief of before, but something softer. Love mixed with loss, joy for her sister's happiness, tinged with the sadness of distance. A child. She's going to be a mother. She's going to be a wonderful mother, just like you would have been to her, all those years ago. Kieran stroked her hair. "You saved her, Elara. Everything good in her life exists, because you were brave enough to knock on a monster's door. You're not a monster. We're both monsters now. Beautiful monsters who tend roses and read poetry." He smiled. That rare, genuine smile that still made her heart flutter even after all this time. "But we're monsters together. That makes all the difference." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the familiar rhythm soothing. Elara had learned that eternity wasn't about grand adventures every day. It was about these quiet moments. The simple pleasure of working side by side with someone you loved, of knowing you had all the time in the world to just exist together. "Kieran," Elara said eventually, "I want to do something." "What's that?" "I want to open Blackthorn Manor to people who need help. Not bargains like you used to make. Real help. A sanctuary for refugees from the war, for people fleeing violence, for anyone desperate enough to knock on our door." She looked up at him. "We have eternity now. We have this huge manor and resources and power. We should use it for good. Help people the way you helped me." Kieran was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then his expression softened with something like wonder. "You want to turn the monster's lair into a haven. I want to give other people the chance I had. Not everyone who knocks will be looking for a bargain. Some will just need safety, food, a place to heal. We can provide that." Elara squeezed his hand. "Catherine told you not to stop living. Well, this is how we live. By helping others live too. You're remarkable. You know that?" Kieran cupped her face, his grey eyes shining with love and pride. 257 years old, and you still managed to surprise me. To make me want to be better than I am. So that's a yes. That's a yes. We'll start tomorrow. Have Bernard spread word that Blackthorn Manor is open to those in need. No bargains. No prices. Just sanctuary." He paused. "Though we should probably avoid mentioning the vampire thing. Might frighten people off." Elara laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the garden. "Probably wise." They returned to tending the roses, but now there was a new energy between them. Excitement, purpose, the thrill of beginning something meaningful together. Blackthorn Manor had transformed. What was once a lonely mansion inhabited by a vampire and his servants had become a thriving sanctuary. Families fleeing the last remnants of war, orphans with nowhere else to go, women escaping violence, elderly people abandoned by their families, all found refuge behind the manor's walls. Elara and Kieran maintained the fiction that they were reclusive nobles who preferred to stay out of sight, conducting most of their work with refugees at night and leaving the daily operations to their expanded human staff during daylight hours. It was a delicate balance, but they'd learned to manage it. The children were Elara's favorite part. The manor now housed over a dozen orphans, all of them given education, care, and a chance at a real future. She taught them to read and write, played piano while they sang, told them stories of faraway kingdoms. She couldn't help but see echoes of Rosie in each of them. In the little girl who loved flowers, in the boy who laughed at everything, in the toddler who called everyone Lala, because she couldn't pronounce names properly yet. It hurt sometimes, that bittersweet ache of loving children she could never truly have, of mothering without being a mother. But it also healed something in her, the part that had been broken when she gave Rosie away. She couldn't raise her sister, but she could help raise others. She could make sure no child went hungry or unloved or uneducated, if she had the power to prevent it. One evening, as Elara was putting the children to bed, reading them a fairy tale about a girl who saved her brothers, she looked up to find Kieran watching from the doorway. His expression was soft, almost awed. After the children were asleep, he took her hand and led her to the library. Their library filled now not just with his ancient collection, but with new books, journals, children's stories, medical texts for the healers they'd hired. "Do you remember the first time we sat in this room?" Kieran asked, settling into what had become his usual chair. "You were 16, desperate, holding your dying sister. I offered you a bargain that I thought would doom us both to loneliness disguised as companionship. I remember. I thought you were a monster. I hated you." Elara took the chair across from him, the same configuration as all those years ago, though now the distance between them was companionship rather than caution. "I hated you for months. And now I know the truth. You were never the monster. Loneliness was the monster. Grief was the monster. Fear was the monster." She leaned forward. "But we've slain those monsters together. We've built something beautiful in their place." Kieran reached across the space between them, taking her hand. The matching crescent moon scars on their palms pressed together, marks of a bargain that had evolved into something neither of them had imagined possible. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Earlier this week, I removed my name from the stone monument in the wild garden." Elara's breath caught. The monument had been Kieran's penance, his reminder of every person he'd failed. Removing his name was significant. "Why?" "Because I'm not that person anymore. The vampire who made bargains with desperate people, who hoarded his loneliness like treasure, who was too afraid to hope. That creature is gone. You killed him the night you knocked on my door." He brought her hand to his lips. "I'm someone new now, someone better, and it's entirely because of you." Tears pricked Elara's eyes. She could still cry, though it took stronger emotions now. "You were always capable of being this person. You just needed a reason to try. You gave me that reason. You and everyone who's found sanctuary here. This manor isn't a lonely fortress anymore. It's a home. A real home." A soft knock interrupted them. Bernard entered, looking apologetic. "Forgive the intrusion, my lord, my lady, but there's someone at the gates. A young woman with 2 small children. She says she's fleeing her village after it was raided. She's heard rumors of sanctuary here." Elara and Kieran exchanged a look, an entire conversation in a glance as they'd learned to do over the years. "Send her to the kitchen," Elara said, standing. "Make sure she and the children are fed. We'll meet with her once they've had a chance to rest." After Bernard left, Kieran pulled Elara close. "Another lost soul, seeking refuge. How many is that this month? 7 families, 12 individuals, too many, and yet never enough." Elara rested her head against his shoulder. "Every person we help is someone who won't have to make the choice I made, someone who'll receive mercy instead of bargains." "You changed me," Kieran murmured. "In all my centuries, I never imagined I could be this content, this purposeful. You took a monster and reminded him how to be human. You were never just a monster. You were someone in pain trying to survive eternity." Elara looked up at him. "We found each other at exactly the right moment. 2 broken people who could heal each other." They stood together in the library, surrounded by books and memories, as somewhere in the manor a child laughed, and someone played a tentative melody on the piano, and the refugees gathered for their evening meal. The manor hummed with life, with hope, with the sound of people who'd found safety after desperation. It was everything Kieran's lonely mansion had never been. It was home. Bernard was dying. He'd been with Kieran for over 60 years, a lifetime of loyal service. Now he lay in bed, his weathered face peaceful, surrounded by everyone who loved him. The entire household had come to say goodbye, servants who'd become family, refugees he'd welcomed with kindness, children he'd taught to fish in the manor's ponds. Elara sat beside his bed, holding his hand. She'd learned that immortality meant watching people leave over and over. But it never got easier. Bernard had been there the night she arrived with Rosie. He'd been the one to carry her baby sister to safety. He'd watched her transform from desperate child to educated woman, to vampire, to whatever she was now. A monster who ran an orphanage, an immortal who chose to love mortals despite the inevitable loss. Miss Elara, Bernard's voice was a whisper, but his eyes were clear. You've done well, better than well. You've turned this place into something magical. We couldn't have done it without you. Oh, you could have. But I'm glad I got to see it. He squeezed her hand with what little strength remained. I need to tell you something about Rose. Elara went very still. She rarely spoke about her sister anymore, though she still received updates through the network of contacts Bernard had maintained. Rose was 31 now, with 3 children of her own, still working as a teacher, still happy and whole. She knows, Bernard said softly. Has known for years. What? How? I told her. 5 years ago, when she asked about her benefactor. She deserved to know about the sister who saved her. Bernard smiled at Elara's shocked expression. She writes letters, never sends them, but she writes dozens of them, all addressed to the sister she can't remember but knows loved her enough to give up everything. Tears streamed down Elara's face. She knows. All this time she knows you're alive, that you sacrificed your freedom for her, that somewhere you're watching over her still. She doesn't know about this. He gestured vaguely at Elara's unchanged face, her vampire nature, but she knows her sister loved her. That's what matters. Does she hate me for not coming to find her? No, child. She understands. She has children of her own now. She knows what you did. How impossible that choice must have been. She's grateful, and she wants you to know she's lived a good life, a happy life. Because of you. Bernard's breathing was becoming labored. You both turned out well. That's all the old man could ask. Kieran entered the room then, kneeling on Bernard's other side. Old friend, thank you for everything. Take care of her, Bernard said to Kieran, and let her take care of you. You're good for each other. We will. I promise. Bernard smiled, his eyes drifting closed. Good. That's good. His last breath was a sigh, peaceful and ready. He'd lived a full life, seen wonders, made a difference. He left surrounded by love. After the funeral, a beautiful ceremony, attended by over 100 people, whose lives Bernard had touched. Elara went to the wild garden alone. She sat beside the stone monument, now transformed from a list of failures into a memorial for everyone who'd passed through Blackthorn Manor. Bernard's name would be added soon, carved with love and respect. She pulled out a box she'd been carrying, the letters Bernard had mentioned, Rose's letters, all of them addressed to my sister, in neat handwriting. Elara opened the first one with shaking hands. Dear sister, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if you're still alive. But Bernard told me what you did, how you saved me when I was dying, how you gave up your freedom so I could live. I wish I could remember you. I wish I could thank you properly. All I have are fragments, a feeling of safety, the ghost of a lullaby, the sense that someone once loved me more than anything in the world. I'm 19 now. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to help children learn the way you must have wanted me to learn and grow. I hope that makes you happy wherever you are. Thank you for my life. With love, Rose. Elara read through all the letters, tears flowing freely. Letters about Rose's wedding, her first child, her struggles and triumphs, and everyday joys. Letters full of gratitude and love, and the aching wish to meet the sister she couldn't remember. The last letter was dated just 6 months ago. Dear sister, I'm 31 now. My daughter asked me today if I have any siblings. I told her yes. I had a sister who loved me so much that she gave up everything to save my life. She asked where you are now. I said I don't know, but I hope you're happy. I hope you found love, and purpose, and joy. I hope you know that your sacrifice wasn't in vain. I've lived a beautiful life. I've loved and been loved. I've made a difference in my small corner of the world. All of it is possible because of you. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please know, I may not remember you, but I love you. I've always loved you, and I'm grateful every single day for the choice you made. Thank you for giving me life. I've tried to live it in a way that would make you proud. Forever, your sister Rose. Elara clutched the letters to her chest and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the very core of her being. But they weren't tears of grief. Not really. They were tears of release, of closure, of the knowledge that the impossible choice she'd made all those years ago had been worth it. Rose had lived, had thrived, had become someone wonderful. The sacrifice had meant something. She felt Kieran's presence before she heard him, felt his cool hand on her shoulder. He sat beside her on the ground, pulling her into his arms and letting her cry until she had nothing left. She knows, Elara finally managed. She knows I loved her. That's all I ever want. She more than knows. She's grateful. She's lived a life worthy of your sacrifice. Kieran kissed the top of her head. You saved her, Elara, completely and absolutely, and in doing so, you saved me too. Blackthorn Manor had become everything Elara and Kieran had dreamed. A haven, a home, a place where desperate people could knock on the door and find not bargains but mercy. Do you ever think about that first night? Elara asked, as they stood watching the manor glow with light. About the girl I was, every day. She was the bravest person I'd ever met. She still is. Kieran stopped, turning to face her. You changed everything, Elara. Before you I was just existing. You taught me how to live again. We taught each other. Elara looked at the manor, at all the lives sheltered within its walls. Every person we help, every child we save. It's like saving Rosie all over again. Except this time I get to see them grow up. I get to be part of their stories. She'd be proud of you, of what you've built here, of what we've built. Elara squeezed his hand. I couldn't have done any of this without you. A young woman approached them, one of the new refugees, holding a baby wrapped in a threadbare blanket. She looked terrified, desperate, exactly like Elara had looked all those years ago. Please, the woman whispered. They said you help people here. My baby is sick. I have nowhere else to go. I'll do anything. Elara's heart clenched with recognition. She knew that desperation, that willingness to sacrifice everything for a child's life. You don't have to do anything, Elara said gently, reaching out to touch the baby's fevered forehead. You just have to let us help. Come inside. We have healers, medicine, food, shelter. Your baby will be fine. You both will. The woman's legs buckled with relief, and Kieran caught her before she could fall. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you, thank you. You don't have to thank us, Kieran said, his voice impossibly gentle. Just pay it forward someday. Help someone else when you can. That's all we are. As they guided the woman and her baby inside, Elara caught Kieran's eye. In that glance, they shared everything. The memory of another desperate girl, with a dying baby, the bargain that had changed both their lives, the impossible journey from darkness to light. Later that night, after the refugees were settled and the children asleep, Elara and Kieran returned to their private chambers. She stood at the window, looking out at the wild garden where Rosie's memorial stood among so many others. I used to think love was about holding on, Elara said quietly, about never letting go, never losing anyone, but I was wrong. Kieran came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. What is it about then? It's about letting go at the right time, about making impossible choices because they're the right ones, about sacrifice that transforms into something beautiful. She turned in his arms, looking up into those storm-grey eyes that had seen centuries of sorrow. I let Rosie go, and it broke me, but it also made us, made all of this. She lived because you loved her enough to let her go, and I'm alive, truly alive, because you loved me enough to stay. Kieran pressed his forehead to hers. We've saved each other in every way a person can be saved, and we'll keep saving others, for as long as we exist. Forever then, forever, Elara agreed. She thought about the girl she'd been at 14, desperate, terrified, willing to knock on a monster's door. That girl had expected cruelty, and received something far more complicated, a bargain that became a friendship, that became a love, that became a purpose. She thought about Rosie, her beautiful, brave, extraordinary sister, who'd lived a full life and died happy, never knowing the depth of what had been sacrificed for her, but knowing she was loved. She thought about Kieran, the lonely vampire who'd been waiting for centuries for someone brave enough to not just knock on his door, but to walk through it and stay, to teach him that love was worth the risk of loss, that living meant more than merely existing. And she thought about all the others, Bernard, Clara, the refugees, the orphans, every soul who'd found sanctuary at Blackthorn Manor, every life they'd touched, every person they'd helped, every bit of light they'd brought into darkness. It had all started with one impossible choice on one desperate night, and it had been worth it. Every tear, every sacrifice, every moment of pain, it had all been worth it, because in the end, love always was. "Come to bed," Kieran said softly. "We have another group arriving tomorrow. We should rest." In a moment, Elara pulled him close, holding him tight, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her chest. "I just want to stand here for a minute, with you, remembering how we got here. We knocked on each other's doors," Kieran murmured, "and we were both brave enough to answer." They stood together in the window, two immortals who'd learned that forever wasn't a curse when you had someone to share it with, watching over the sanctuary they'd built from bargains and loneliness and love. Somewhere in that manor, a sick baby was being healed by their doctors. An orphan was sleeping soundly, finally safe. A refugee was crying tears of relief because they'd found sanctuary. And in a cemetery by the sea, a woman named Rose rested peacefully, having lived a life worth living because someone had loved her enough to give up everything. The sacrifice had been worth it. The bargain had been worth it. All of it, every impossible moment, had been worth it, because this was what love looked like. Not mercy, but something far more powerful. Hope.